Welcome back to the Young Entrepreneurs Podcast. I'm your host, Spencer McPartland, and today's guest, I would say he doesn't need much introduction. He's been in the radio space for, let's give or say, 20 years. My guest is Glynn Washington, the host of Snap Judgment from KQED, and then he also has the spin-off program called Spooked. So without further ado, Glenn, thank you so much for being here.
Thrilled to be here. I really am. This is fantastic.
Now, my first question is, your story is anything but typical, and what part of your early life shape how you see the world today, and also your journalism and your radio perspective.
So how does that how does it my background shape what's going on today? Is that the question, Spencer?
How does it change how you see the world today from your upbringing?
Sure. So I did have an odd upbringing, as you kind of alluded to. I grew up in an apocalyptic, fundamentalist, end of days, white supremacist religious cult. And I think that, it was an interesting background to be sure. And that lens on life, as much as I like to think I've gotten away from it, that lens on life does stay with you. It does shape how I see things. And one of the most important things about that and about coming out of that organization was the importance of story, how that story was the currency that kept everybody coming back every week. Story was the tool that got us together. Story was what made people send in 30% of their income to headquarters somewhere that they would never see. Story did all that thing. Story did a lot. That story and belief. And when I was leaving in my late teens, I felt stupid. I felt tricked. I felt wronged. But I felt like I didn't want anything to do with these people, with this organization, with this stuff. But in a way, the gift, if you want to call it that, the gift they gave me was that, I did in fact sit at the feet of masters as far as story was concerned. If you consider mastery getting people to do what you say and do have the absurd beliefs and give you all their money. I didn't want to do that, but I wanted to see later on if those tools of story could be used in a different way. Let's just say use them for good, use them for empathy, because I really do think that what is most missing in our national, even our international dialogue is empathy. And by empathy, I mean the ability to put someone in yourself in someone else's shoes, to see the world through someone else's eyes. And the best tool that we have to do that, the best technology that we know for letting you into someone else's world is story. And so that is kind of in a nutshell, kind of my thought process that led to Snap Judgment.
Now, didn't before that you were a contestant, you and Al Lyson were you were contestants and you two got selected for a prompt or whatever it was.
Yeah, so the immediate or approximate start of Snap Judgment was in um 2007. There was a thing called the Public Radio Talent Quest, and they ended up picking 10 finalists for this. I heard about it on one of those early things at the time called a podcast. And when you actually listen to podcasts on pod devices, on iPods, the precursor to the iPhone. So I was listening to it on one of those. I heard about this contest. I entered on a lark and forgot about it, but find out like about 3 months later that I'm in, and which was crazy in of itself because I thought it was a buddy playing a joke on me. Um, but every week at the time, they would put like a sort of a challenge out. And the 10 finalists would do the challenge, and they throw one person off the virtual island, so to speak. And I think the one that you might be referring to was one of the challenges I got was grace. Like the verb was, okay, we're going to give you a word and you're going to have 2 minutes to riff off the word.
Right.
Oh, yeah, okay. What is it? And it could be anything. And the word I got was grace. And I don't really remember what I said about it, but I just know that I felt like you just threw me a big wet softball right in the middle because it's such a religiously loaded concept, such a religiously loaded term. It's a word that kind of encapsulates a lot of my own background, and so it was one that I could just kind of go off on in a lot of different tangents. And I was thankful I got that word, and thankful that Al Letson, the other person I think that you meant, who was the for me, I thought we at the end. whenever I would battle something, Al would come back strong. I'd try to hit him. He'd come back harder. It was crazy. And what ended up happening is at the end of it, both of us won the contest, so to speak. They picked two winners, which you got very, very lucky about because I would not want to be on the other end of a contest like that with Al Letson ever again.
Right.
He's now one of my dear friends. At the time, he was my biggest enemy. Now one of my dear friends. He lives in the Bay now as well. He was
Right.
time of the contest in Jacksonville, and I'm actually going to get to see Al this weekend. Yeah, it was a lot of things. Talk about grace and fate and luck. Thing Al Letson into my life was one of the greatest pieces of luck I've had.
So it was a kind of full circle moment, if you will.
Yeah, you wouldn't know it at the time. We were trying to, battle each other out. We were going for the prize. The prize, which in fact there was no prize. The contest did not have a prize. The contest we were competing against each other for. There was no stated prize. Like you win, congratulations. But we were both able to parlay that into the initial first round funding, first year funding for our respective projects.
Now, how did you go from a passion project to this has to work, from you enjoy being a radio host to this has to work and blowing it up internationally?
Well, as you probably know, I was at the time, I was at the Haas Business School for director of the then called the YE program, the YE, the Young Entrepreneurs at Haas program. And it's now
Okay.
called Rise, I believe. And at the time, like I'm in a business school. And so when I'm making this decision, I've got to make a business analysis of what's going on. And so when I do this, the little bit, the money that I could get from public radio was not sufficient to. So I'll just back up a little bit. This is a little
Okay.
public radio history.
Great.
At the time, there was a brand new hot cool show on the scene, and that brand new hot cool show at the scene at the time was a show called Radio Lab. Now, Radio Lab was innovative in that Jad Abumrad would make 5 amazing episodes of radio and put that out. He was in the basement of the station at WNYC in New York. And that's what he would do. And he'd make 5 episodes, and they'd be great. And everyone would laud and praise. They were great. They were amazing episodes. And so when we get our little bit of funding, they said, well, you guys don't have enough funding to make a weekly show. So you should do the Radio Lab model and make 5 amazing episodes or something like that. And I thought about that and I thought, well, that's great if you are in a WNYC basement. But if you are not, if you're sitting at your kitchen table in Oakland, California, you got to figure something else out. And so that meant that we had to try very, very hard to get on public radio stations themselves at the time. And that was a very, very difficult trick because every station is its own individual business and they make their own programming decisions. And we didn't even have a distributor. We asked all the companies, including NPR, if they would distribute us. They all said no, that we would not. And then through some games, because I watched a movie on Don King and how he kind of got a few of his fights together and basically said, yeah, I got Ali and I got the venue. So do you want to fight? And then go tell Ali, well, I got the venue and I got the opponent. Do you want to fight? Telling everybody that kind of thing. I kind of did a version of that. And eventually NPR did agree to distribute the show. They didn't agree to do anything else for it. They weren't going to put any money into it. So I'm saying all this stuff because it's all well and good. What did I want to do? I wanted to tell stories. I wanted to tell stories. But in order to make it work, I had to make a lot of decisions that are best described as business decisions in order to get a mechanism to tell these stories. And this was, and then, we're going to make it like Radio Lab, only we're going to do it weekly. Everyone laughed at such a preposterous notion. And it was absurd. It really was absurd. Thankfully, we were able to hire people who were equally crazy as we were. And that first year was nuts. It was completely nuts. But we had some of the best people in radio that I didn't know that. They didn't know it at the time. They didn't know it. But now Roman Mars was my first hire. He went on to found the 99% Invisible Empire. Stephanie Fu was our intern. And she came in and now she's bestseller author. She worked for This American Life and everything like that. My partner, Mark Ristage, I mean, he just became this he is a co-founder in the pure sense of the word. He was there from the very beginning and just made this stuff work. We're all growing together to try to make this thing work. We knew we had a chance, and we also thought that this kind of space just needed a little bit of different type of energy. And as the business people like to say, a disruption, if you would. And yeah, so we kind of thought we can't wait for to do 5 episodes because no one's going to care. They're going to put our episodes out and then forget about us, and no one's going to care. We don't have an anchor yet. What we got to do is get on these stations as best we can, and we fought and charmed and did all various things to get on various stations. At the same time, we knew podcasting was not that big a deal at the time, but in our initial documents, we're like, this has got to be part of the Snap DNA. We've got to make sure that podcasting is front and center of every single thing we do. And again, that was at the time that seemed weird, and it was, and honestly, it did not initially pay off. There was nothing, there was no financial remuneration from podcasting whatsoever. It was drained until the super big podcast came out, which was Serial. And that was at least 8 years after the founding of Snap. And so for a while, it looked like our bet, for a long while, it looked like our bet on podcasting was not paying off. And until it did.
Now, what about storytelling? Since you, as the host and the co-founder, you have to hear people's pitches, how do you decide what is a good story that goes from the initial pitch to what people hear on the radio?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, to some degree subjective, but yeah, there's definitely elements I'm looking for. For me, a story has somebody who wants something, someone who tries to get that thing. I want to see a twist along the way. I don't want to see every aspect of this thing coming. And I want it to land not with the realization and then I realized and then I knew and I now I did all that kind of stuff. I want it to end with an action. I want to see I want that action to illustrate how different that person is at the end of the story than they are at the beginning. I want to see it because people can say anything, but what do you do? What do you actually do? What do you do? And I love it when stories introduce me to perspectives I don't know anything about. I would assume that other people might not know that as well. Like, for example, we did a story a little while ago on a woman who was competing to be Miss Snake America or something like that for a beauty pageant in Texas for an area that raises a lot of snakes and stuff. I don't know anything about like West Texas snake beauty pageant world at all. It turned out it was fascinating. And these women who were competing had a lot of personal stuff on the line for this crown. And hearing their stories really took me into a world that I didn't know that existed before I started the story. And it really took me there in a different way. And it really gave me a chance again to wear somebody else's skin. This is really in the end of what I want to do because, a story is distilled life. And I mean, I'll put it like this as well. A story is an invention because we have a beginning, a middle, a twist, and an end. Life doesn't really work like that, right? We're forcing kind of what's going on into a little bit of a box to some extent. This is a stage of it, but maybe a distilled stage. And but I still want you to feel that person. I need the stories to be intellectually engaging because I have like some of the smartest audiences ever. But more importantly, I need to have an emotional resonance. I need you to feel what this person is going through, whether or not you agree with the decisions they make. I want you to understand why they made them. And because kind of a core tenet of our storytelling is that it gets very, very, very hard to hate someone if you know their story. That's kind of where we're at. It's kind of what we want to do.
Now, how did you decide to have your own voice and not follow the mold that had been set at the time for whether it's Howard Stern or any other big radio host? How did you decide to go out and create your own voice that people know today?
It was to some degree necessity and some degree deliberate. You're starting a show. And I remember this, I got my advice from my mentor class, the host of This American Life. And he said something like, "Oh, you're starting a show, huh?" I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Well, I hope you got some interesting friends because you're not going anywhere for 2 years." And I was like, "What, huh?" And like, "Yeah, that's the way it goes." Well, it turns out to be very, very prophetic. Trying to launch this, trying to keep it up. Yeah, all my friends are people who thankfully, he said, I hope you know some interesting friends. You have interesting friends. And thank God I did. Really interesting friends who had crazy stories. And that got us through. But what also needed to get us through was we committed to an hour on people's public radio dial. And so whenever there's a hole, whenever there's a gap, that's where I got to come in. And I better have something. And oftentimes for that first couple years especially, those stories were drafted as crazy in the middle of the night and recorded as quickly as we could. So I became a voice in a different way. Now, I will say this as well. The idea of Snap, kind of my own personal storytelling, is to have a touchstone that you know every week. I will lead you to this story, and oftentimes it'll be very, very pedestrian. I might tell you a story about getting a drink of water. I might tell you a story about crossing the street, but it's done in the purpose of setting up the kind of the meat of the show. I Because we're gonna get crazy. We're about to get wild.
Right.
Most of our stories are going to take you somewhere that you're not even going to believe. In order to get there, though, in order for you to let me take you there, I've got to set the stage a little bit first. I got to give you a little taste of the familiar, a little taste of my own crazy, and then we'll go to this other thing. It's a launching pad for what you're about to hear. Large, there's a lot of my storytelling.
Now, was there ever a moment where you questioned whether your perspective would resonate with the audience, or is it kind of a matter of the internal intuition where you were kind of saying, I know what I want and I'm just gonna kind of let it do its own thing and the audience will find it eventually.
I think that any creative endeavor is an act of hubris. You're saying, I think they're going to like it.
Right.
And you could be wrong, you could be right. And it's crazy. Like a lot of times when I'm say a story doesn't resonate the best necessarily, I still think I like that story. I think it might even be some of my finest work. And you have to be able to live with that. As an artist, as a writer, as a painter, as a musician, you have to be able to live with the idea that someone might not like this now. Maybe the packaging is wrong. Maybe the timing is wrong. Maybe the same story 5 years later will resonate in a different way, which happens all the time. Um, but I like it lots better when people say, "Oh, that was great. That was fantastic." If anybody who does anything on the internet goes to the comment section of whatever they've done, they will never do what they do again. At least
Right.
if they take it seriously. There is going to be a mass of, I don't know, professional haters. And, I don't go into a lot of I don't think people would be surprised at my political beliefs or anything like that, but I don't think I lead with that. But certainly, if I was to do something stupid like open Twitter, there would be various people calling me all kinds of N words and all this other kind of stuff. And you get to wear it almost eventually. At first, it kind of stings a little bit, but then you wear it as a badge of pride. I can't possibly make something week after week after week that every single person is going to like every single time. I think what happens is people you have a trust to some extent. Look, I don't know where he's going with this, but I think
Right.
he's coming from a good place. I think that's the joy and the benefit kind of that weekly sort of relationship, or whenever you listen to a relationship, you're saying kind of trust them enough to give them a little to give. I know where this fool's going right now. I'm not quite sure, but let me just go ahead and buckle up for a minute because he's taken me to some good places in the past. So and I would say that you like if you spend 6 months painting a painting and somebody comes through and they say they don't like it, if that really hits you so that it devastates you enough so you don't spend the next 6 months with another painting, it's terrible. It can be a terrible thing. You just have to there has to be you have to protect that sensitive artist core to some extent. You really do. And you have to expose it to people who like but that's again, it's a hard thing because I do take criticism. I have to be critical myself and I have to be able to say, that didn't really work. I want it though. I want the criticism to be from someone who kind of gets what I'm trying to do, who appreciates where kind of the lane I'm in. One thing that I tell all the time right now is like, if I write a story, Most of the time, most people, they write a story and they want some feedback and they send it to their closest friends, family, companions. And the people do the best they can. They give them the feedback they can. But those people may or may not know where you're coming from and may not know what you're trying to do. If I write a story and I send it to my mama, what you think? She's going to say, well, I read it and it's very, very nice, but I think it needs more Jesus. That might not be where I'm coming from. Now, if I'm coming from I'm trying to do Jesus stuff, that's the kind of feedback I need. If not, I need to find someone who gets it and can really be critical about this is what you're trying to do and here's where you failed. And the good thing about kind of my genre is we get to do that at speed. I gotta do it again and again and again. And kind of the first person that gets to read anything like I said, my partner Mark, can be like if you just heard us speaking, you'd think that we hate each other, but we have to speak in shorthand because the next show's got to come out and we gotta go. Like this sucks here, this sucks there. What do you think? Damn it, I think it's fine. That's how we have to like it's quick. It's a quick brushstroke. And but I do appreciate that he knows where I'm coming from. And I think that when he's doing something, he can appreciate the same from me that I'm not. And here's another thing as well. This is hilarious, but it's always true. Someone will give me a story and they'll say, okay, I worked in this story. How does it work? And I said, well, this part doesn't work and this part doesn't work either. And they said, well, how do I fix it? And I'll tell them what they need to do to fix it. And then they'll come back and I said, well, what do you think? I said, well, this part still doesn't work and this part doesn't work either. Well, I did what you told me to do. And I'm just like, well, I did tell you to do that. It didn't work, did it? We got to do something else. I can't, what I can confidently say is this does not work. What I can't confidently say is this is necessarily how to fix it. There's a bazillion ways and some things don't work you've got to try a lot of things. You got to keep, and again, we have the speed issue. We got get it done is all I can say. It's like figure it out. I can help, but I can't necessarily give a prescriptive solution that's going to fix a story.
Now, what's allowed you to keep the creative momentum over the 20 plus years that you've been doing this?
It's always hard. I think if it got easy, the momentum would go away. Snap Judgment sounds so much different now than it did when we first started. Our first episodes had like 9, 10 different stories on them. Now we generally have one major story that we're doing. Turns out that it's impossible to maintain with the staffing that we have of that type of pop storytelling. We had to lean in more. Very, very different type of storytelling than we did in the past. And I think what's creative momentum has happened because the show has been allowed to evolve to where we are. The show's a different show. We are different, more mature storytellers. The genres have changed and morphed around us. We want to be able to incorporate what's going on now. And so, yeah, the reason why I think there is still very much a creative energy around it is because it's a completely different thing. And it'll be a completely different thing in 5 years. We have to grow. If I was doing the same thing over and over again, we would be done.
Now, was there an episode that didn't work? And is there a lesson that you were able to learn from it early on or even currently?
I think that the review process is such that if something completely doesn't work, hopefully you don't hear it. Hopefully it doesn't make the air. But there's certainly been things that work better than others, things that we had high hopes for that didn't quite make the grade. And yeah, there's been a few stage shows where I kind of I didn't do as great with a story that I had hoped. I have no illusions as to why I failed. It was because I did not allow enough time to create a great project. And that is horrible when you know you messed up. You know why. And all you can do is say, I can never let that happen again.
Now, so sorry.
No, go ahead.
I'm gonna bundle these two into a question because I know we're short on time. What motivates you and kind of what keeps you going on a day-to-day basis? And then if you could ask the next guest one question and you don't know who it would be, what would that question be?
What motivates me? I think that there is a magic to looking at a blank page and saying, okay, I'm going to fill this up with an experience that's going to move somebody. It's such a challenge, and it's a challenge that I think that a lot of, say, new writers would be surprised at the fear of someone who would be considered more of a veteran, at how we're both looking at the same blank page, thinking the
Right.
same. I have no idea what this word is going to start. I have not a clue. The only maybe advantage that I do have is knowing that probably if I keep my ass in the seat long enough, something's going to emerge. I have the knowledge that even though I can look at this screen going, this is just crap. What
Right.
am I going to do? I like literally like that just happened this morning. I don't know what that nonsense was. Just a bunch of nonsense. So that's it for people who haven't done it, who are like wondering how to start, what to do. Just know that you and the veteran are have a lot in common, and people really do want your what decide what you want to do and just do it. There's no other way, especially in an artistic medium, for the real growth to happen besides just the doing of it. You got to just do it. If you in the filmmaking, you at some point you got to make a film. If you got to make the film with your iPhone, do that. If you got to make the music with the drum can, with a coffee can, you have to do that. You got to just do it. And you've got to just and you have to make a habit of doing it. And if I was going to ask the next person on your podcast anything, I would ask them, when was the last time they experienced awe? Awe, I think, such an interesting word in our time today because we like to imagine that we've quantified everything, that we understand all this stuff. Or AI, IT, we got it, we got it, we got it, we got it. I don't think we do. I don't think we got it. So that's what I would ask them.
Okay. Now, I know that you've kind of alluded to it, but who are 2 to 3 people that are either well known or who are under the radar that you would recommend for this podcast?
Well, I would one woman, um, Anna Sale, she's in Berkeley, and
Okay.
she has a podcast called Death, Sex, and Money. And is just, I don't, the best way to describe her is wise. She's just a wise person, unsurprisingly so. Really, not just a, she's not some old crone or something like. She's just a wise person. And another person, I think that Sandeep Sood is a business person who probably I disagree with more than anyone in my personal life, but he is coming from perspective that is interesting. And I think he has a way to look at what's going on in our modern world that is a perspective that I think it's good. It's good to challenge. It's good to hear. It would not, I think it would be good for people to hear. And also, in a lot of ways, right now, I'm a fantasy sci-fi guy. And the person who I think is combining an inordinate talent for that genre with an amazing business acumen more than anyone is Brandon Sanderson.
Okay.
And he seems to be willing to talk to just about anybody for anything. He's just out there I don't know how he has the time for the writing that he does with the amount of podcasts and speaking and cons and stuff that he does. It's exhausting to follow from a distance. I don't know how he does it. And I think it'd be interesting from a business and creative perspective to pair the two and see what's going on with him.
Glenn, this has been an honor. And thank you for taking the time to share your perspective. This has been another episode of Behind Their Eyes. If you found value in this conversation, make sure to subscribe and to not miss a episode when they drop. And we will see you next time.